I was thinking just kind of walking through. I mean, John has a video that walks through the deployment and everything, but I do think it's if you're starting from zero, it is it's a good way of learning about oSnap and just how I think how it works with Snapshot. Because you're not deploying the contract, you're deploying the contract from a safe, and it's interacting with Snapshot. So we can kind of go through that flow and then answer any questions as we go.
Hey,
So,
Alex,
yep.
before you kind of get into that, maybe you should just give high level what oSnap is, and just give the context in case people don't really know the
Yeah.
whole reason.
Yeah. So what oSnap really allows you to do is attach transactions to a snapshot proposal. And then the flow of actually these DAOs using oSnap using Snapshot can essentially be the same. It can, in terms of the coordination through a forum when they talk about ideas and then actually putting the snapshot vote up to Snapshot, like none of that actually changes outside of when you are creating the proposal. You can add transaction data that will be executed if if the proposal actually passes. And how that works. So, like we have, I mean, Polymarket and Cozy, and we have all these great integrations that you can see in the Oracle UI, and basically like the actual like this Jets versus Bills game that Polymarket, it's verifying that the Jets actually beat the Bills, and this is very similar to how oSnap works with Snapshot. It's just you're verifying that the Snapshot proposal actually passed and the proposal met the minimum quorum and voting period. And if that is true, then this transaction data can be proposed. It goes through the challenge period like it would with a Polymarket proposal, and then if no one disputes it, it can actually be executed. So really, it's a similar pattern as other integrations. You're just basically using it to execute transactions that are included in a proposal on behalf of the safe. So it reduces the reliance on multi-sig signers because you're essentially able to execute by anyone being able to post the bond, propose, it goes to the challenge period, and then execute. And with V2 that we recently announced, like a bot will actually verify that the proposal passed and then the criteria was met. And if that's the case, the bot will actually post the bond, and if it's not disputed, it'll actually execute the transaction. So in this case, it would transfer 0.025 ETH to this address because if this proposal passed. I'll stop. Are there any questions like up to this point? Like, I know that was kind of a lot.
Yeah, all I would say is that I'm totally feeling the vibe of the automation. So not needing multi-signers to go in after the proposal passes and signing transactions and stuff makes work really, really easy. So all in for the automation, and I'm glad you could do that with version 2. Yeah.
And it could bypass a legal issue as well, isn't that right, Alex?
Yeah, like we don't necessarily advertise it, but it is a huge, by not having the actual multi-sig signers sign off and on every single transaction. I mean, there is it's the shifting to anybody being able to propose and execute the transactions. So I think you're removing not only that reliance on the multisig, but actually requiring these like known individuals. It's not hard to find out who these multisig signers are, and like the current flow for most DAOs is like you have these multi-sig signers sign off on every transaction. So if it is something that like breaks the law or something, you know, there is a difference between having those signers actually approve and execute versus anyone being able to come in and propose and execute. It's just much more decentralized.
Sure. Maybe we go back a little bit, step a little back as well about if a DAO comes to UMA and says, hey, we want to use the oSnap, what kind of the minimum requirements that they need to have on their side to be able to implement oSnap?
Yeah, the two main ones are having a snapshot space. Those are very easy to create. And then the other one is having a safe that can deploy the oSnap module. So those are the two main requirements.
And is this on any chain safe is on that they can do this? And Snapshot, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Snapshot, it's very easy. I mean, they're off chain, so it's very easy to add new chains to Snapshot. The other, I mean, I guess the other requirement is like UMA needs to have like the Oracle v3 deployed on this chain. So that is typically
okay. Can you explain a little bit why that would be the case? How does oSnap interact with the Optimistic Oracle?
Yeah, so when this transaction, or so sorry, when this proposal is completed and someone is actually coming in here and requesting execution, you're proposing that these transactions be executed, and it's being verified by the UMA Oracle. So these transactions are essentially being proposed and can be disputed in the same way like Polymarket proposal could be disputed. So you're proposing to the Oracle these transactions be executed. It goes through that challenge period, and then they can be executed without having the Oracle v3 on that network. It just wouldn't work because you need to be able to make this proposed transactions call to that essentially is then validated through the Oracle.
Sure. And the real tuner had a question here. Is the new oSnap UI through the UMA landing page or on its own page? It's separated out.
Sorry. So the new Oracle. Oh, like the V2 feature?
Well, no, the oSnap itself, does it have its own UI user interface?
Oh, so everything is through. So the UI for deployment is it's through Zodiac, and it's basically an app. So this is the UI that teams would use right now to deploy. And after the contract's been deployed, it can then be configured with Snapshot. And then this is basically the UI that is used. So I'll just go through the whole flow. So so basically, let's just assume a team wants to use a 2-WETH bond with a 24-hour challenge period, and then they would put their snapshot space URL and voting quorum and voting period in here. So these three parameters are snapshot specific, and these two you'd want them to meet or to match the space settings. So if you go into like this, so if you want this, so like let's just say the standard test, we want this space to be associated with this oSnap module. What you'd want to do is just have the quorum. I haven't set a quorum or voting period, but you'd want the excuse me, you'd want the voting quorum and the voting period to match, because these rules are essentially what is used to validate a snapshot proposal. So like if there's a dispute and I was a voter, I would essentially use these rules to apply to this snapshot proposal and make sure that it met all the criteria and it shouldn't be disputed. So like for this, we would just basically have this space URL in here, and then like the voting quorum, it's set to 0, but like you would put that quorum and period in here, and then you would deploy. And I've already deployed a lot of different oSnap modules. But like after you deploy, you could come into the snapshot space, come into settings, and in advanced, there's this SafeSnap plugin. And this is where you would put that oSnap module address. And that's essentially linking that oSnap module to this space.
And you need to put the chain ID as well in.
Yes, you would also need to put the chain ID. I think we're working on improving this flow. It's a little difficult right now to work with, but you would only the key thing to remember, like for deployment and for actually configuring with Snapshot, teams are only doing this once. Like the average community member doesn't have to worry about this flow, and we have documentation on this whole process. So we haven't actually had any teams have too much trouble with this, but we are looking to continuously improve the process.
Sure.
So yeah, after you like configure it, then when you create a proposal, you're going to see this option to essentially make this proposal a snapshot proposal or an oSnap proposal. So if you click yes, you'll then have the option to include these transactions into the proposal. And that's what that's what we were seeing earlier with just like with this proposal. I added this 0.025 ETH transfer if this proposal passed. So that's kind of how the flow of actually integrating oSnap is. You would just go to Zodiac, deploy the module, configure it with Snapshot, and then you're able to add these transactions into the proposal. Does that kind of make sense?
That makes sense. And Real Tuner says, "Oh, nice! I need to play around with this."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've set up Ungoli as well, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's deployed on Goerli, so you can and there's this demo.snapshot.org, which makes it really easy to deploy test space and just kind of play around with it.
And for testing, it's good to put kind of very low values for quorum and liveness period. And what about in a production? Do you advise it, or is it case by case basis?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we kind of started off like when we were talking to teams, introducing like the flexibility and it's kind of something that I think caused anxiety for teams in terms of like how do we set these parameters. And I guess at UMA we're probably the best resources to like understand what these values should be set. So with V2, we're basically required to opt into that. You need to set the bond to 2 WETH, and that way, like UMA would completely take care of like the bond proposals or posting the bond during a proposal. The flexibility for
Sorry,
a lot of DAOs.
Does the team have to provide that WETH for you?
No, UMA will post it. So like nothing is required from the actual team outside of using that 2-WETH bond.
Is there a way to demonstrate this bot and how it works, or is it all under the bonnet, as it were?
That's a good question. I think that if you're really curious about how it works, in the docs, there's it walks through the whole process of how to set it up. And just, you can even look at, it's all open source. You can look at the code. To actually use it, we're not running it on Goerli. I don't think. David might know. So I think might be difficult to use on testnet, and
is it deployed on any layer 2s that we could go, if anybody was curious, going, because it's low fees on layer 2s, so you could use them as test grounds.
Yeah, you could. I mean, it's deployed on Polygon and Arbitrum and Optimism. So
okay,
yeah,
you could choose any one of those and play on there. I'm curious.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, what it's really doing is, it's just taking care of this manual process. So you wouldn't have to click this button and wait. I mean, this is a test space, so it's 3 minutes, but you wouldn't have to wait. Excuse me. You wouldn't have to actually click this button and stuff. The bot would automatically do it for you.
So for the liveness, if you set it for 2 hours, would that be okay? Or do you want to do 24 hours and be really cautious?
Yeah, you'd want to be really cautious. I mean, a lot of DAOs, these are, interacting with the treasury. So it's very sensitive. So I'd say 24 hours is, probably you wouldn't really want to go under that. I think 48 hours to 2 or 3 days is what we're seeing most teams comfortable with. And in terms of the bot, you can use 48 hours or 72 hours. It's just really that 2-WETH bot as being a requirement. So I'd say 2-WETH with a 2 or 3 day challenge period is what we've seen the most of.
You said Uma's using the bots setting up. What about our teams setting up their own bots?
Yeah, there's teams that one or two that I can think of that have set up their own instances of notifications, because the bot, if you go to their docs, it'll also walk through how to do Discord or Slack notifications. Slack being more internal, and then Discord for the community. So we have seen interest in teams running their own instances, and also
but they don't have to.
They don't have to, no.
Yeah.
But I would actually say some more teams are kind of thinking through how to use another form of alerts. So kind of reduces the reliance on just Uma's bots. So if you used another form of on-chain alerts, that's another thing that teams have been thinking about.
It's a little bit like multi-factor authentication kind of thing, but using the bots stage.
Right. That's the perfect way to think about it.
And talking about this is like V2. If a DAO was already using the previous version, could they easily move up to this? What's their process for them to move to this new kind of flow?
Yeah, the only a DAO could just change. So if they were if they were using a different bond, they could just basically go into their module, and there's a method called set collateral and bond, and they could just change this to use 2-WETH, and then they've opted into V2's automation.
Is that automatic? As soon as they do that, they will be included?
Yeah, that's a good question. Rainus or David might know better. I'm pretty sure that if you change that, that's the only action that would be necessary.
Nice.
Sorry, what was the question?
If a current oSnap module had a like say across 10 WETH, if they change their bond to 2 WETH, would they automatically opt in to V2's automation?
Yeah, I think that's all they need to do. Yep.
Cool. Yeah, so that's what I assumed, but so yeah, it's really easy to opt into it.
Excellent, excellent. And this is on the Zodiac model. You guys are working on a safe module on its own.
We are.
Is there a reason why we're doing that? Will make things a bit easier? And would people? Is there any advantage for people who are using the Zodiac model to move over to a safe app?
Yeah, I think once you've deployed, you wouldn't need to like move over. It's I think the real advantage is for new deployments. The flow is just going to be so much more seamless, and I also think it's a little bit of a user experience hurdle to just like find the Zodiac module, find oSnap. It's more clicks than it needs to be, and when you actually come to deploy, we started off again with like that thinking of flexibility. We thought like 6 parameters, but I think that with the safe, it's even easier. Since we have V2 now and we're really recommending a 2 WETH bond, like this can be like an advanced configuration, but like we don't necessarily need to show more parameters to these teams that are deploying than they need to unless they want to see those advanced features. And then other advantages of having our own safe app.
Alex, I think that just about covers it. There's also this room for error when you deploy this on your safe, and then you have to go back to Snapshot and kind of like copy and paste certain addresses in. I think there's just a lot of confusion around like, okay, well, I want to use oSnap, but I have to like add Zodiac on the safe, and then I have to add safe snap on Snapshot. It's just a lot easier for discoverability for like Alex is saying, for new deployments. But in terms of like the actual functionality, and if there's any advantage, I don't really think there is.
Yeah, so David, just for context, he's been working on the actual safe app. So for like if I'm a team and let's just assume I use the safe app and I deployed, and I go into, is anything changing like in here in terms of like how I add? Because like right now it's like this config that it's this is probably like even more than the actual Zodiac deployment. I think this is what causes the most confusion in terms of like how to deal with this, and we can't really do anything with this reality address. It causes a lot of problems to existing reality modules. So we're kind of limited to what we can do here. But I don't know. Yeah, David, I don't know if you want to add any more context to this.
Yeah, I know this is supposed to be a V2 learning session and we're talking about future work here, but we're trying to actually just remove this whole plugin configuration and create a dedicated oSnap plugin in Snapshot. So rather than, if you go to add a plugin, instead of Safe Snap, you'd be adding oSnap. And then there's no configuration. That's the hope is that we can do this. You add the oSnap plugin. There's no more configuration. We can automatically detect based on what treasuries you have added in Snapshot, which ones have oSnap enabled or not. And then if they're not enabled, we can basically just create a link for you to enable it with almost one button press to enable it.
Yeah.
Cool. Can't wait for V3.
Yeah.
The only other thing, so a lot of this, like what we're talking about, is it's really on the process of setting up for the DAO, and V2 is really like from a user, like a community perspective, it's just so much better. So a lot of like what we're talking about, like teams really only have to do once, and we haven't even. I wouldn't say we got like complaints or anything. We're just really just trying to make the experience of integrating easier. But I think that we took the right approach in focusing on the actual like existing integrations and new integrations, having these transactions automatically being proposed and not having to worry about any like community members paying for the gas to execute. So like this is the main feedback that we really kept hearing over and over again, and more and more questions. So like even though we're talking a lot about the deployment process, the root of like the actual user experience on a daily basis is inside this proposal and automating this. So this is like I think a 0 to 1 improvement in terms of the user flow, and now we're kind of taking a step back and reevaluating like just like the deployment process.
Indeed. And myself, I'm a system administrator, and this is so much easier than some of the things I have to deal with. So I think you guys have done a great job on it. In terms of verification, oh, sorry, did you have a comment there?
Well, I was just gonna say like the other thing is that like having these transactions in the actual proposal, I think a lot of teams have like really enjoyed the consolidation of having everything in this snapshot proposal, and not like a lot of teams actually use like Tally for the actual execution, and having like 2 separate platforms that they're using, and not to mention like you read this proposal and not really being able to see the actual transactions that are being executed. So I do think that like even though a lot of this is automated, there's just still so much value in seeing the actual transaction payloads included in the proposal.
That's a good point, because on Snapshot you're going to get more participation because it's gasless rather than using something like Tally, right?
Yeah. It's like, and teams that have done that, like they'll get. I mean, sometimes it's even as extreme as like 50 to 100 voters on a snapshot proposal, and then like on Tally they'll get 7 or 10 or something. So it's a huge drop off. Yeah.
Right. Just moving on to like verification, we've got Kurapika here from the verification team, and they're saying, will the oSnap v1 verification still be the same for oSnap v2? Is anything changing in that sense? Will they see something slightly different?
It should be.
Maybe we should explain about the verification team. Because we have real people's eyes on these things as well, right? We don't just rely on tech.
Yeah, I should have pulled up like the actual doc that walks through. But yeah, I think focusing on V2, like nothing will change in terms of like how the verification looks or anything along those lines. Like what it's really just instead of having someone manually click this and propose, it's just having a bot do it. So in terms of like the on-chain events and everything will be exactly the same. So there won't be anything more that the verification team has to do. I can't think of anything different.
Sure. And how about the competition? What other products do DAOs are looking at when they're comparing oSnap?
Yeah, I think the buckets are probably like their own custom on-chain contracts. I'd say it's pretty rare, but it also could just be like if a team has like their own on-chain voting, like we typically there's just so many other DAOs that to like work with. It's a really hard sell to like move away from their own on-chain voting. So
because
like,
they're so invested in it, they've spent time and funds
right.
on it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good if you spent like, you know, $250,000 like with audits and having team go, you know, allocating team resources, and then you move to Snapshot. Yeah, like we do talk to teams, but I don't think our number one priority is talking to teams that are currently using Snapshot, and then their governance flow is basically having the multi-sig sign and execute. And yeah, like that's the majority, but also I think we've talked to a lot of teams that are using like Snapshot and Aragon, Snapshot and Tally, and those are probably the teams we get the most excitement from because they know the hurdles, like the UX hurdles that kind of takes to have multiple platforms, and being able to consolidate that and add the on-chain execution into Snapshot is it's like a value proposition they really understand. And so like that's a major theme with a lot of teams that we're talking to. Yeah, I mean, does that answer your question? I'd say like Tally, on-chain voting, and then Snapshot are like the
what about Kleros?
Well,
you
yeah,
don't come up against that so much.
Yeah, like there's a lot of teams like 1inch uses Reality.
Reality, which is
there's a good amount of Reality integrations, and I think that I mean just being honest, like that's also kind of a tougher sell because a lot of teams have invested a lot of time in writing out their own documentation and processes to like use Reality, and I think it's a lot easier for teams that have no on-chain execution currently to or I'm sorry, that don't have like a Reality or something to like see the value proposition of using oSnap and adopt it. It's it's tougher when teams are already using Reality, unless they've had like a bad experience or it's not working with them. That's just kind of like what I've seen. But we still talk to those teams and we still tell them the value. I mean, like how we're better than Reality, and like we still have those conversations. And I think that's not to go too into detail, but like I think that is a big thing that we kind of pushed like this bot automation V2 is it's just ways to like continuously improve our product and even make it leaps and bounds better of anything that's existing. So yeah.
Yeah, I put in my intro for this learning session that it's becoming like an essential DAO tooling for governance. And
it really is. I mean, it's like I keep saying it, but we don't view oSnap as a product that's finished, and we're just like, I mean, putting a lot of resources to keep improving the user experience, the deployment, the automation, and I think it's just going to keep getting better. And we're talking to so many DAOs, we're getting so much feedback and incorporating that into our actual features and products. So, I mean, I try not to think about but it is exciting to see like what oSnap's going to look like even in a few months from now, and so it is becoming more and more essential.
It's already impressive, I was going to say.
Yeah.
And the other thing as well, it's I think it was this week that in terms of total value secured by the Optimistic Oracle is overtaken across. So
yeah, if you include oSnap And yeah, it's funny. Across's treasury is actually included in that number too.
Really? And of course, yeah, Across uses oSnap. Gotcha.
Yeah. But it is the number is growing. And with Cow, I think Cow's like around 30 million. So there's some large DAOs that are using it, and it's kind of just the more integrations, the larger the DAOs that are using it, it's just more momentum towards other DAOs integrating.
Sure. I've kind of exhausted all my questions. That's great, Alex. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think would be worthwhile to go through? Because I think we covered most things.
Yeah, I think like one thing that I just want everyone to understand and ask questions on if there's any confusion is just like the user flow of using oSnap, and then just how, if there's any questions on just like how oSnap uses the Optimistic Oracle or anything along those lines, happy to go into detail. But I just to understand the value proposition of oSnap, and then just how it's using UMA, if there's any questions along those lines.
Yeah. And we will put this up online, so we can include some useful links where people can go, like for example, the demo.snapshot.org site, and also our documents as well. So then they'll have everything there.
Yeah, and there's an UMA specific landing page that we've had for a while, but it's been updated as well. If anyone hasn't seen it, but it's kind of like a walkthrough of what is oSnap, and there's a video of, I think this is the one of John deploying in 71 seconds. So yeah,
I've seen that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, we're always around for questions, and I'd encourage anyone to just do a testnet deployment and play around with it.
Yeah, and if you know any DAOs that might need some DAO tooling, then come see Alex.
Yeah, and if someone doesn't want to go through like the whole process of deploying and everything, you can just like go to, I think Across is probably the best space, and you can look at some of their proposals and see how they're using oSnap and like what those transactions look like. They've all been executed, but like it's a good way of just seeing how oSnap's being used and what it looks like in a proposal.
Sure. Okay, I think that's it, Alex. That's great. Unless anybody else have any questions. I'm looking at the chat and there isn't. But thank you very much for walking through that.
Yeah, of course.